My name is Scott Heckes. I'm a board member for the Kingsley Art Club. It's my honor today to introduce today's speakers. And I'm just starting with a question. Have you ever wondered how a museum exhibition comes about? And I think today we're going to learn the ins and outs of curatorial programming from two of the principal curators here at the Crocker Art Museum, Francesca and Sara. And they're going to talk about, as Suzanne said, their collaboration, which brought us the Making Moves, a collection of feminism exhibition, which is on the second floor galleries of the museum. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you all after today's talk and the reception to go up and take a look. As just a brief introduction, Dr. Francesca Wilmott is the Crocker Art Museum's curator of post-war and contemporary art, as well as photography. She holds a PhD from the Courtauld Institute in London. She has worked in numerous museums and galleries in the country dealing with contemporary and modern art, including stints at the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the Jan Schrem and Maria Minetti Schrem Museum in Davis. Joining her today is Sara Morris, who's the Crocker's Ruth Rippon Curator of Ceramics, and she oversees the historic and contemporary ceramic collections of the museum, as well as crafts and decorative arts. Sara is a PhD candidate in art history with a focus on feminist art at the University of California in Santa Barbara. She too has worked in numerous museums and galleries, focusing on modern art, contemporary art, craft, and design. And she worked with among other institutions, the Renwick Gallery at the Smithsonian Art Institute in Washington. I forgot where it was. I wonder how I did that. Anyway, it's my great pleasure to introduce the two of them today, Francesca and Sara.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon. So I'm Sara Morris, and
I'm Francesca Wilmott. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, and we just want to extend our thanks to both Suzanne and Scott and the Kingsleys, all of you, for this really warm invitation to come and share a little bit about our experience organizing this show over the past 2 years and a little bit about our curatorial ethos and philosophy that we tried to implement here with this exhibition, which is a little bit different than how things normally go at the Crocker Art Museum. So about 2 years ago, Francesca and I began to kind of think about what an exhibition of women identifying artists might look like here at the Crocker. As both relatively new curators here, I had been here, at this point I had been here not even a year, and you had been here, you were in your second year.
Yeah. Right now, I'm just over 3 years at the Crocker, and you're just over 2 years.
Yes.
So we were both relatively new at the museum when we started to talk about the show.
And what makes the Crocker so special is its really long institutional history. So the collection is enormous. Not all of it is cataloged in our database yet. And so we were really eager to do permanent collection research on the artworks that we were in charge of. And so we thought, why not put these two birds together and organize a show of women artists from the permanent collection, which would enable us to do much needed research on the permanent collection. So in order to do this, we needed the help of all of our colleagues across the curatorial department. We didn't only want to work together and collaborate with one another, but we wanted to kind of collaborate with everyone, senior and junior curators alike. And so we want to give our immense thanks and extend our thanks to Augustine Arteaga, Scott Shields, Sarah Farkas, Amelia Kit-Yu-Chow, Caitlin Schwartz, Delaney Bird, and Casey Bird, all of whom are in our department and had shared their insight and some of their favorite works with us that we added to the checklist. And everyone contributed research as well. And so some of these curators are junior curators, like I said, so as a part of our curatorial philosophy, we wanted to kind of create a pathway or opportunity for our more junior staff to gain some much needed experience curating a show. And here we are.
So yeah, fast forward 2 years, and this is what it looks like now. Sara, I think you were going to explain the title behind the exhibition, right?
Yes, so I can certainly do that. Making moves, it kind of has this fun alliteration, but also this double meaning. Making moves for us kind of spoke to how the Crocker as an institution has grown and expanded its collection to include more women artists, especially since the 1970s, and the feminist movement and social justice movements in the 1960s. But we're going to show you some work that was actually acquired by the Crocker well before then, in the 20s and 40s. And so the Crocker has always been collecting contemporary artwork by women for a long time. And this is something that we felt like we really wanted to celebrate. And then making moves, it also speaks to the ways in which artistic expression and creation has the power to inspire people. And it really has the power to enact social change and change overall.
So the exhibition includes 78 artworks by 74 different artists. As Sarah mentioned, they're not all women who are in the show, although it's primarily so. And then we're representing 250 years of art history within this exhibition. So the earliest work in the show is from 1780, and the latest work is from 2025. So some of the works were literally arriving at the museum as we were installing the show. They were fresh out of the artist's studio. And then we also have acquisitions that are from 1872, some of the foundational Crocker gifts to the city, and then acquisitions that we made in 2025. So it really runs the gamut. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the show.
So we knew that we were going to be thinking about artists whose work has really responded to and been inspired by the feminist art movement, but we're also going to use feminist theory as a lens with which to think about the more historic works in the collection. So we're using feminist thinking in many different ways, and so we made this Venn diagram for you to show you our three main points of inspiration. So we kind of started to think about feminist thinking and artwork from the permanent collection, but another main point, the one at the top, is the Crocker's history of women's leadership, and we're going to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, and so with the work from the permanent collection, as we mentioned, we really wanted to better understand the collection as newer curators at the Crocker, but a big part of that was also identifying gaps within the collection and making very targeted acquisitions that helped us tell a much broader, more inclusive story than what we could do with the existing collection. So you'll see, if you look at the number at the bottom of our captions, it shows the acquisition year, and you'll see several works with that 2025 year. So very new works to the collection.
Okay, and a little backstory. I was not around in the 1970s during second wave feminism. Sadly, I wish I was. I was born in the wrong decade. But I started college in the early 2000s. So by this time, revolutionary feminist thinking had already been institutionalized within academia, within universities. I was extremely lucky to not only take feminist art history classes with brilliant professors, but Francesca also, and we both took courses in feminist and gender studies within the university.
And just as a little anecdote, Sarah and I knew each other before we arrived at the Crocker.
We did.
I was doing a study abroad from London to UC Santa Barbara, where I met Sarah, and we shared the same professor, Professor Jenny Sorkin. So we'd been thinking about this topic for quite a long time.
Yes. And so when I heard this job opened up at the Crocker, I was like, I would get to work with Francesca, sign me up. And so in our courses, we've been introduced to many inspiring feminist theorists and thinkers and artists who've changed the world. But I kept going back to this short handbook, and so did Francesca. And it's a short, it's really called a handbook. It's not even called a text, really. And it's by feminist theorist Bell Hooks. And I was introduced to this text as a freshman in college. And it's called Feminism is for Everybody, Passionate Politics. And within the first 5 pages, she offers a very simple, straightforward definition of feminism. And it's this: feminism is a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression. So she makes clear with this statement that feminism is not anti-male. She is saying it is anti-sexism. And in that way, it's something that we can all get behind. And this really, served as a starting point for us. We wanted to create a very accessible exhibition in order to think about feminism.
Sides. So you can actually see here above the door, we've put Bell Hooks' quote as kind of the rallying cry, the point of departure for the exhibition. And we really just love this inclusivity that she's promoting. And it gave us a framework for approaching this very expansive topic, as we've said. Mm-hmm. So as we mentioned, one of our major goals was researching the permanent collection. So this required us to get away from our computer screens. We left our offices, we went into our storage vaults, and as new curators, we really wanted to see what treasures the storage vaults were holding. And so we got to look at our painting racks, like you can see here. And as we were putting together the exhibition checklist and refining our selection, we tallied up some numbers, and we discovered that 67% of the 78 artworks in the show have never been before on view at the Crocker. Pretty high number, yeah. And there's various reasons for that. A huge percentage of the show is new acquisitions. So this is the first time they're debuting at the Crocker. So that's one reason. You'll also see that there's a lot of works on paper, a lot of photographs in the exhibition, and due to light concerns, we don't have those permanently on view in the collection galleries. Those are rotated, and they're on view for a much shorter period of time so that they don't get overexposed. So there's different reasons why works haven't been on view. The list goes on, but we thought that was really interesting, and we wanted to start to address that and rectify that with the exhibition. Mm-hmm.
Another point of inspiration, which was probably one of the first to really inspire us, because at the time, Lyle Jones, our director of 25 years, was leaving, and we were thinking about her legacy. But that got us thinking about the leadership of women within the Crocker's institutional history. And so, of course, you can think about Margaret Rhodes Crocker and her founding of the Crocker in 1885. In which she gifted the building and its treasures to the city of Sacramento. And that generosity was followed by that of Jenny Crocker Fassett, her daughter, who had business in Korea, where she amassed an incredible collection of Asian porcelain, jades, and ivory, which served as the Crocker's foundational gift of Asian art in 1925. So our ceramics collection is over 100 years old, which is, we started collecting it in 1925, so for over 100 years. And this porcelain bowl was suggested to us by our curator of Asian art, Amelia, and I think she selected this piece because it has this really lovely grapevine and squirrel motif wrapping around it. And when you go into the exhibition galleries, I think it's in Gallery 243, we've decided to display it upside down so you can get a better look at the motif around it. And in my conversation with Amelia, she liked this piece because she thinks that when Jenny Crocker Fassett was in China acquiring this piece, it probably reminded her of her home here in Northern California, where we have plenty of grapevines and squirrels. So there's that really lovely story. And here we have a photograph of Jenny and her 4 children, and both of these are on view in a part of the exhibition called Collective Memory, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end if we have time.
So we were also inspired by the leadership of different art organizations who are involved with the Crocker and have been involved with the Crocker for a very long time. And we're not just giving the Kingsley a shout out because we're here on the stage with the Kingsley Art Club, but they really were and are such an important source of support and engagement with the Crocker Art Museum. So the Kingsley Art Club, for those who are less familiar with the history, it was founded by a group of 15 women here in Sacramento in 1892. And fast forward, a century plus, and the Kingsley is still helping us make major acquisitions, including the work of Koo Kyung-suk, whose beautiful woodcut print you can see here on view in Making Moves. And so here we have Koo last spring here on the stage giving a Kingsley art talk that was really because of this acquisition that was made possible through the Kingsley Initiative. And the Kingsley Initiative also brought in several other works by artists of color and women to the collection, including the work of Jessica Wimbley, which you can see in the stairwell when you enter the museum. So I wanted to share a really lovely quote by Ku that I think drives home this connection between the past and the present that inspired a lot of our thinking. So she said, "As a Korean artist, I have always felt like a stranger, even though I have lived here for over 13 years. It's amazing to me that the Kingsley Art Club was organized by 15 Sacramento women 132 years ago. It is wonderful to have this connection with those women." So we'll talk a little bit more about the work in detail as we go through.
And another important organization that I quickly want to highlight is the Creative Arts League of Sacramento in their support of the Crockers acquisitions and exhibitions. They were also founded by a group of women, 10 women in 1952. And since they had organized exhibitions at the Crocker and elsewhere in the Sacramento region, and helped place work here at the Crocker Art Museum. And so these two artworks for me really tell a really interesting story of women supporting women here at the Crocker who were involved with the Creative Arts League of Sacramento. So on the right here is a ceramic sculpture of a box by Ruth Rippon, who is my namesake. So I am the second Ruth Rippon curator of ceramics. My position was established in 2020 through the generosity of the late Anne and Malcolm McHenry in honor of the artist who taught for many decades at Sacramento State and was really influential and important in shaping ceramics as a discipline here in Northern California. So here is kind of an unlikely work that you don't really encounter by Ruth Rippon elsewhere, and it's a peep show. So she's created this box, and there's a little eye hole which you can look through. And on the side, she's kind of included an inscription that gives you a sense of what you might see inside. It says, "She shimmies, she shakes, she crawls on her belly like a reptile." And so you think you're going to peep in here and you're going to see that. You're going to see a lady shaking it. But when you look in, it's really hard to make out what's happening. You are a part of an audience, and when you look through, you kind of can barely see a nude female figure at the back. And so what she's doing is she's kind of playing with our expectation, where she's playing with the genre of the female nude and erotic art that has been dominated by male artists for so long, and she's not giving us what we want on purpose. So Ruth played a major role in organizing artist Viola Fry's retrospective that happened here at the Crocker through the support of the Creative Arts League of Sacramento. And I had to call up my dear friend Susan Willoughby and ask her about this piece. I know she's here in the audience. Sorry, Susan. And I was trying to get to the bottom of why are these series of plates, there's over 30, no one has ever written about them, and Viola Fry is a pretty popular artist. There's a lot of literature on here, but no scholarship that could tell me why these were called the Crocker series. And after speaking with Susan, she confirmed that Viola had made series of plates to fundraise for her own retrospective exhibition. This particular plate was purchased by Ruth Rippon, who had a major hand in organizing the retrospective. And it's quite poetic because then the plate finds its final home here at the Crocker in 2018 through Rippon's estate. So it's just a really lovely story that kind of speaks to the leadership of arts organizations and women's roles within them and how they've really shaped our collection here. Sorry that was a long story, but it's kind of nebulous.
But I think it's a great example of the type of curatorial research that was really driving this project, which was collaborative. And we were working, as we mentioned earlier, with so many different curators in order to represent European arts, art from our Asian collection, our ceramics collection, photography, post-war, contemporary, really almost every area of the collection is represented in one way or another. And so doing collection research is not just about burying your head in a book, however. And so I think these photos really represent the different types of ways that research is brought to life. So on the top, you can see Sara and I in the gallery studying the object in person. I promise we're not touching the Frida. It does look like it. It's a bad angle. In the middle here, we have a performance that's inspired by some works in the collection and in Making Moves, particularly the Betty Saar. And this is a performance by Katya Grokowski, a New York-based Ukrainian artist who did this performance in the ballroom on the opening day of Making Moves. And then on the bottom is a conversation that Rupi Tut and I had in the auditorium last spring in the build-up to this exhibition. So research was coming to life in all these different ways. We also collaborated with our preparators, who you can see here on the lift, and hanging up the Angelica Kaufman on the right. We worked closely with our in-house framers, Ido and Fernando, to frame Koo Kyung-suk's work. So even though we bring a work into the collection, it doesn't mean we can just put it on the walls immediately. Works like Koo's that are large and that require certain hinging and other presentation requirements, they take quite a lot of work to go from acquisition to wall. And so this exhibition was really what enabled us to get the work framed and present it to the public. A fun story about this is the work is so big that it exceeded our framing capabilities within the Works on Paper vault, where we normally do a lot of our framing. So we actually had to bring it into the gallery and frame it in situ. So that's what you're seeing here.
And I'm sure, as many of you know, framing is expensive. And by doing it in-house and having a talented team, we were able to.
And it really pushed our team to expand their knowledge as well. And this is, I think, the most ambitious framing project that we've done in-house with this team. So that was exciting for us to see. We also worked closely with our in-house designers, Brian and Tyler, on the graphic identity for the show. So these are a few different examples of color schemes that we were considering before we ultimately landed on this one. So the eggplant purple, might have some questions about that. You might recognize it. This color was also in the Van Dyck exhibition that immediately preceded our show. And Sarah Farkas, our European curator, did a lot of research on historical colors that would be fitting for a Van Dyck. And then we got together and we decided which ones would also be fitting for Making Moves. And that's a way of cost savings and time savings that we really try to consider for all of our exhibitions. The font on the top was inspired by handwritten protest posters, so underscoring the collective spirit of the exhibition. And then this cursive script here on the bottom was actually written by one of our graphic designers, Tyler, on his tablet. That's his handwriting. And then he scanned that into the computer and made this typeface. So it's very collaborative. I love
a personal touch.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's really bringing together the collective spirit and the personal individual spirit that are the driving forces of this show.
And this process happens months and months and months before the opening of an exhibition, actually when we're doing the design and layout of our art letter, so the museum's monthly magazine. And if we're doing our job right, the graphic identity of the art letter will match what you see in the exhibition. So it's conversations over months and years. Conversations with artists also, which are some of our favorite. And for over 2 years, when we had time, Francesca and I would conduct studio visits with as many artists as we could to learn a bit more about their artistic practices, their career trajectories, and their processes, and to see the space in which they work in. And I know we would always kind of walk away from these visits feeling really inspired, and we'd just be in the car chatting, and that's kind of when the themes began to emerge for us for the exhibition.
Often artists have the best ideas and see things in a different way than we would necessarily approach them. And so we brought our notebooks and took diligent notes to make sure to capture those ideas.
And if we weren't able to visit artists because they were not local. You know, we weren't getting on planes to conduct studio visits. We don't have that kind of travel budget. We would reach out to the artists who are living and ask them to fill out an artwork questionnaire that we developed. So as you know, a lot of artwork comes into our collection from private collections. Most of the time, these artworks are purchased from galleries, and then they go on and they live in someone's home for decades. And all of that information that you see on a wall label can disappear and be lost to history. So when an artwork comes to us here at the Crocker, it's our job to kind of ask questions of the object and to fill in all of those missing spaces and gaps. And we did that by reaching out to some of the living artists and their estates. 67% of the artwork in the exhibition is by living artists. So this was an incredible opportunity to, again, do more permanent collection research. And we received a lot of these back, and what's great is that now we have this wonderful primary source document that is going to live with the artwork way after we're gone. So when future curators and art historians have questions about the work, they can come here, see the artwork in person, and have this document that was written by the artists themselves to learn about it.
Yeah, and just as an example of how important those documents are, I was working at the Minetti Shrem as a curator before I came here, preparing for a Wayne Thiebaud exhibition. And I went to MoMA, I accessed their Thiebaud archive, and I found this statement that Wayne Thiebaud made in 1962 on his artist questionnaire that really encapsulated so many ideas that had never been captured or expressed in that way before in scholarship. And so now I've found that this artist questionnaire is being reproduced everywhere. I was just at the Courtauld in London, and they were using that artist questionnaire as one of their research documents for their show. And so that's something that we want to do as we're thinking about how the contemporary moment will one day be history. It's important for us to document and archive that.
And we really wanted to encourage these artists to not just reproduce what's on their website or in their artist statement, but to give us original answers to these questions, because sometimes there is a little nugget of information in there that's different than what's publicly presented or published elsewhere. And then another great thing that came out of these conversations with artists and these artist questionnaires were topics about conserving these pieces that we've inherited in our collection and figuring out the best ways to not only display them for this exhibition, but future exhibitions. And we had a great story, if you want to tell it, with Robin Hill and her piece.
So the last time that Robin's work, Dissipation, over here was on view at the Crocker was around 2010 when this building opened. And the work was then packed away into boxes. There were some instructions, but it wasn't entirely clear how to reinstall this work without the artist's involvement. And so Robin very kindly came, met us during installation, and talked us through exactly step by step what was necessary to see this through. She wrote detailed notes, and she's actually going to then work with us after deinstallation to store the work and kind of attach the different pieces in a way that will be more archival and will be easier to assemble in the future. And so that's the kind of collection care that these exhibitions make possible.
So while fancy traveling exhibitions are great, big blockbuster exhibitions are great, these permanent collection shows are also very important for us as an institution for this reason.
And then I think before we jump into some of the artworks in more detail, we wanted to also point out that the location of the galleries on the second floor is really ideally situated between the historic gallery and the 2010 Teal Family Pavilion. And so we're thinking about bridging the historic and the contemporary even within the architectural space.
Exhibition themes. So we knew that we wanted to organize an exhibition about artwork that told stories of women's experiences. We were building a checklist that had hundreds of artworks in it. There's only 76 in the exhibition, so we had to make some cuts. So how do you go about doing that? Well, we decided that we wanted to present a thematic exhibition based on ideas that tended to resonate with artists across time. So when we were looking at the checklist, we were thinking, wow, these artists seem to be interested in the same ideas, but their experiences are different based on the time in which they're making. So the first theme, we're going to go over each of the themes, but in these slides, we've also included, as part of your behind-the-scenes talk, stills from our virtual SketchUp model. So SketchUp is a software in which Francesca and I and curators here can model each and every exhibition. So we can design the exhibition and the layout, and there are many different reasons for why we do this. We can go over a few. But I just wanted to let you know what you're seeing here is kind of a bird's eye, top-down view of making moves. It's a floor plan. And what we're going to do is we're going to start in the McClatchy Gallery where the exhibition starts. So you're going to follow the pink star. And we're going to start in 246. And in this gallery, our theme is Californians Making Moves. And in here, we really wanted to celebrate how the Crocker has always collected contemporary California art, and it is a real strength of our collection. And so we wanted to kind of celebrate California and California artists in this space through the theme of movement. So both physical movement, like gestures and creative processes and the body, but also movement as it relates to travel. So California artists traveling elsewhere to gain new skills, to go to artist residencies, which are incredibly important, and then come back and share what they've learned with their community, or artists who are coming to California. And we're learning a lot here from their own experiences. But then there's also movement in regard to social justice movements and artistic movements. So it's a pretty broad theme, and we presented a pretty broad historical range of work in here. So on the top is Francesca and my SketchUp model. So this is our virtual model. We are not exhibition designers. We have not taken a SketchUp class. We need to.
We are self-taught.
We are self-taught. If you were to view a SketchUp model of a professional, it would look incredible.
And if any of you have SketchUp skills
Yes,
and you would
call
like
us.
to train us, please see us after the lecture.
But we're basically making a very rough model of the layout of the exhibition. And so on the bottom is our final installation. So you can see that they're kind of close. But what we're testing for in this initial phase is what artwork needs casework and pedestals. How big do the pedestals need to be? How big is it in relation to our wall? Is there enough wall space to have 7 artworks on it? Wait, 8 if you include, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. How much space do we need between them? Just questions like this, and then questions about the space, so the gallery space. Where are the walls? Where are the windows? What artwork can be in a gallery with a window because of UV restrictions? Some artwork will fade over time, and it can't be in a gallery with natural sunlight. And so these models kind of allow us to ask all of these questions to test well before we ever put an artwork in the gallery space. So this allows us to not overhandle art, which is incredibly important. When the work comes up from storage, it goes where it needs to go.
And if we have a special loan, which we do, that we'll talk about, and if the loan comes to us with a courier, somebody who's escorting it, that museum is often going to require a version of the SketchUp model to see and approve the placement well in advance of the show. So we can't just figure it out on the fly. We really have to be prepared. It also allows us to think about what stories we're telling.
So one kind of central artwork in this section is Miss Quinn, which is from 1909, and it was by a Sacramento artist, Amanda Austin. So Amanda, she started her art studies here in Sacramento at the Crocker, when it was the Crocker Art Gallery. She took her first art classes here, but this piece was not made in Sacramento. It was made in Paris. So after gaining some skills here, she travels to Paris, where she learns how to sculpt in marble, and she brings this back. This was acquired by the Crocker in 1940, 30 plus years after it was made. So it was still pretty contemporary at the time that we acquired it. And while we don't know who Miss Quinn is, we don't have that in our object file, unfortunately. We didn't send her an artist questionnaire. For us, this young woman kind of represents the freedom that Amanda Austin may have felt as a young woman, as an artist traveling to Paris in the early 20th century to study art. So again, thinking back to that theme of movement and the Crocker's institutional history here. And we actually moved this. It was previously on view in the late 19th, early 20th century galleries on the 3rd floor, and we rescued her from those galleries and we brought her down.
Gave her a new context.
Yes.
Yeah. So another work that I want to highlight from this section is by Lynn Veldner, who, I'm going to embarrass you, she's here today. And Lynn is a woodland-based artist, and she made this work in 1992 while on a residency at the Bemis Center in Omaha, Nebraska, which is why the title has NE in it. So thinking about movement, leaving California to have that time and space to cultivate one's practice was really fundamental. So this is made of these ceramic forms that she made in her hand. So as you're looking at the pieces, you can kind of imagine the tactility of them. I wish I could hold them all in my hand, but they're behind plexi. And they speak to the rituals of everyday life and this physical act of making as being so integral to creativity as well as to self-care, and how those two practices are often intertwined for many artists. So we're really lucky to have this work in the collection. Another work I want to highlight from this section is by Betty Saar. This is a collage called Woman with Two Parrots from 2010. And Betty Saar is a legendary Los Angeles-based artist. She's turning 100 this year from a family of artists. We're so lucky. We have quite a large collection of her work as well as her daughter's works, one of which, Leslie Saar, is also on view in this exhibition. And this is a work that was inspired by a poem by the African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar from 1899 called Sympathy. And this poem inspired Maya Angelou when she wrote her memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And so here she's using birds as imagery for freedom from both racism and sexism. So it's a really beautiful piece. And then, so moving into the gallery, so you'll take a right past the front entrance, the signage, into our first gallery section within the space called Representing Women. And here we're looking at women representing other women as well as representing themselves. So as you know, throughout history, women have most often been portrayed by men, and often they're stereotypical portrayals where they're idealized, they're exoticized, sometimes vilified. Sometimes they're also revered. There's all different ways to approach the representation of women. But it was important for us here to show women representing other women. And so in our SketchUp model, pretty much the same. We can play what's the same, what's different? I love to play this game with my kids.
Oh yeah, can you spot the difference in the models?
Any takers? Okay, I'll point it out here. So we swapped the placement of the Joan Brown and the Angelica Kaufman. We wanted to give a little bit more chronology to the exhibition, as this is the first gallery that you enter into. And we also felt like the Joan Brown here really corresponded nicely with this new acquisition of Dora Delarios' work, which is another seated woman.
And they're roughly from this same time period, same generation of artists. Yeah. This work was recommended by our phenomenal colleague, Sarah Farkas, who's our curator of European art. And it is an absolutely stunning portrait by Angelica Kaufman, who's a Swiss artist, active in London and then later in Rome, of a dear friend of hers, Sarah Bates, who is a singer. And Sarah let us know that this is actually one of 3 portraits by Angelica Kaufman of Sarah, and this is by far the most intimate of the 3. So if we're thinking about how artworks challenge traditional conventions like the nude, allegorical figures, and idealized portraits, here we have a really intimate, kind of tender portrayal of this very famous singer. It's not a full-length portrait where she's wearing a very fancy gown at the opera. Instead, she's in just everyday attire. Her hair is beautifully coiffed with these kind of primroses at the top. But Sara let us know that this was most likely painted for her close family and friends and would not have been seen by the more general public.
And then she's placed next to this Joan Brown drawing from 1973. And Joan Brown was part of a drawing circle in San Francisco where they would sketch from live nude models. But she was the only woman in this circle, which included artists like Elmer Bischoff, Manuel Neri, Gordon Cook, and Robert Arneson. And so around the time of her retrospective at SF MoMA, I was invited by her son, Noel Neri, to come by his storage and select a few works for the Crocker Art Museum's collection. And I came home with her. I think a few of my colleagues were surprised by the hairy legs.
Not me, I loved it.
And the underarm hair. I will not name names, but I love this one. I stand behind it. But yeah, I felt like we really needed this kind of female, this women's empowerment image right up front as well. 73, yep.
And with the arrival of our new director, Augustine, Francesca and I quickly presented this show to him. And then not a week later, he said, "It's a great show, but you know what you need? Frida. You need Frida." So he was able to secure 2 artworks by the legendary Mexican artist Frida Kahlo for the exhibition from private collections. And as soon as you kind of turn the corner of the space in the representation gallery, you are now in the Frida gallery. And we just thought this was a phenomenal suggestion. Again, we're collaborating with everyone in our curatorial department, and through this collaboration, the exhibition only gets better. And this is a good case in point. So with the arrival of the Fridas, we were able to contextualize her phenomenal self-portrait, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a second, with 4 photographs from our permanent collection, which were new acquisitions, as well as The Seated Lady by Dora Delarios, which is that ceramic sculpture. So here we have some behind-the-scenes images of what happens when an artwork is uncrated. So when it arrives to the Crocker, it has to acclimate for 24 hours before we can uncrate it. These are living things. And once it is, we lay it out, and our wonderful registrar, Jess Barclay, is in charge of all reporting and recording. So she is making sure that there's no damage that happened to the artwork when it was shipped to us here at the Crocker. And if there was, she needs to report it to insurance. And then we would ask a series of other questions. Is it in good enough condition to put on view? Can it go on view? And if not, how do we make sure, what steps do we need to take so that the work is now conserved and fixed before it goes to where it needs to go?
Luckily, none of that happened with the Frida.
No.
It was in perfect shape. Yeah.
But it was a really exciting moment unpacking this piece here, which is really the centerpiece. It's Self-Portrait with Loose Hair from 1947. And if you're curious what the bottom hand-painted inscription reads, we've translated it in English for you. If you click it, And it says, "Here I painted myself, Frida Kahlo, with my reflection in the mirror. I am 37 years old on this July 1947 in Coyoacan, Mexico, the place where I was born." So this particular self-portrait is considered among many art historians to be incredibly important for many reasons. The first of which is that she lies about her age. She is not 37. She is 40 years old when she painted this. She's looking really tired and weary because she had just undergone surgery. But the important part about her, the reason why she lied, is that she wanted to place her birth date in 1910, which was the year that the Mexican Revolution started. So this is a part of her self-mythologizing that she underwent, and it becomes part of her persona. And the other part is that she's giving you other visual clues within this portrait that's connecting her back to her Mexican heritage and the start of the Mexican Revolution. And that is her hair being loose down around her shoulders. So we usually see it up with flowers in her hair, but here it's down, and she's wearing traditional Mexican attire. So she's giving us these visual clues that places her back 37 years prior.
And so we also got a second loan of Frida's work, this really beautiful and sweet pastel and crayon drawing of her dog. And I wanted to share with you a little anecdote about this photograph from our collection that we've placed it into dialogue with. So this is a photograph by Lola Alvarez Bravo, who is one of Frida Kahlo's lifelong friends. Were actually so close that Bravo took her death portrait several years later. And I was visiting a collector's home in Davis in July of last year. I don't know if they're here, but they were offering us several works from their collection, including this Frida Kahlo photograph. And I knew that we had several other photographs representing Frida in the collection. I thought this would be a nice addition to the collection. And I got back in my car, and I checked my work email, and I had received an email from Augustine saying, I've secured these 2 Frida Kahlo loans for your Making Moves exhibition. One of them is this little drawing of her dog, and then the other being the self-portrait. So in this photograph, you can actually see her with her beloved Mexican hairless dogs that are represented here in the drawing. And then she's looking into a mirror, just as she is in the self-portrait. So there's a lot of synchronicity happening here with this acquisition. I like to think that the ghost of Frida was involved in the exhibition as the third curator.
And this is exciting because this would be Frida Kahlo's first presentation here at the Crocker in Sacramento that we know of. So it's incredibly important to have these works here in the building.
And then these are 3 photographs that we already had in the collection by her close friend Emmylou Packard and her husband Diego Rivera. So we, again, see a more intimate, personal side of Frida through these photographs.
So if we moving along, following the Pink Star through the first gallery of the exhibition, we find ourselves in the section called Care. And here we're thinking about care in terms of elder care, child care, housework, self-care, environmental stewardship is a form of care. And many of the works in this exhibition are kind of thinking about, the artists are thinking about how many women, especially women from marginalized communities, often shoulder the burden of these kind of undesirable forms of labor. And this shows up in the content of the pieces, but also through the materials and processes in which these artists are using. So if we go to the next slide. So here's our SketchUp model again, and then the final installation. But we can skip ahead. We can skip ahead. We don't have to play the game.
Went a little fast.
We changed a lot in this gallery. It's a small space, but there's quite a lot of work in it. And we were able to feature this new acquisition, which was a gift from Janet Molbatani. And it was great because we had tried to go after a similar beaded sculpture by a California artist, Liza Liu, and we lost. And not a week later, I was doing a collector visit with Janet, and I look, and I see a Liza Liu iron. And I said, Janet, can we please have this for our exhibition? It is absolutely perfect. And she generously agreed. And so Liza, she is a very important artist for us because she attended art school at the San Francisco Art Institute in the 1980s. She was taking classes in painting and sculpture, but she started to create this beaded sculptures. And this work did not resonate with her art professors. She was getting negative feedback, negative criticism. She was failing her classes because they were like, why are you beading sculptures? Why are you performing this type of women's work and craft? This is not art. So Liza drops out of school. And she immediately goes to work on her masterpiece, which is called The Kitchen. And it's a monumental installation of her mother's kitchen that's to scale, entirely made from beads. In 1991, this was at a major exhibition at the New Museum in New York. So she had the last laugh with all of her art professors in San Francisco. This piece, it's now owned by the Whitney.
And it's on our label as well, so you can see it there.
So we did not have any object information about this particular iron. Thankfully, Liza is still around. She lives in Los Angeles, so we emailed her in her gallery, and she emailed back right away, and she said, "I cannot believe you have my iron." I have not known where this has been for decades. This is an incredibly important piece because it predates my kitchen. It's one of my first sculptures. It actually has my mother's clothes iron in it. So, yeah, you kind of want to cry thinking about that. It's just a really special moment, and we're so happy to have it here, and we're happy that Liza knows it's here. But I think there's a lot of craft in this exhibition. A lot of feminist artists are taking up art forms that are associated with women's work, like beading, embroidery, weaving, tapestries, or ceramics, because it has been historically undervalued by art historians. So if you were taking art history classes in the 60s and the 70s, and you had your art history survey textbook, you would have not found any craft in that textbook, and you wouldn't have found any women artists in that textbook either. Jansen's art history survey textbook didn't include women artists, I think, until the early 80s. And when the author, Jansen, was asked why he didn't include women artists in his book, he said, well, there aren't any great women artists that deserve to be included in this survey textbook. So that really inspired a new wave of feminist art historical scholarship. So I'm happy I wasn't taking those art history classes. You're only getting half of the story there.
The field has changed quite a lot. So another work in this section is by Jalen Gomez, and this work is really thinking about collection care as well as the invisible labor that is involved in caring for a museum. And that's something that we've been thinking a lot about as well as we're putting together this exhibition. So Jalen Gomez is an artist based in Los Angeles, and after completing art school, she was a live-in nanny in West Hollywood with a family. And through that experience, she really, it really informed her practice and the way that she would shed light upon different forms of invisible labor. And so here we see Clara cleaning after Jeff Koons. And so we see a museum custodian cleaning a Jeff Koons sculpture. And this sculpture sold for $11,801,000 at auction. So it's based on a real life sculpture in 2008.
Called New Hoover Convertibles, New Shelton Wet Dry, 5-gallon double-decker.
Yeah. And so I think this is a good example of where the field of art history is moving. You know, we're looking more closely at the intersections between gender, between class, between different forms of identity, and that is shaping how we think about feminism today. So the last section in this gallery, and I'm going to move a little more quickly here because I'm keeping an eye on the time, it's reclaiming the erotic. There's a reason we put it in the back here. So
all the school children giggle when they go in there.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of docents in this room, so I'm curious to hear what anecdotes they might have. But here, this section is using humor in the body to reclaim familiar subjects like the female nude, sexual pleasure from a genre long defined by the male gaze. And so I'll give this one away. Here, the main difference is that Judy Chicago's work was not originally in the main sight line, and then when we installed it, we put it kind of front and center when you enter the space. And the reason we did that is because Judy Chicago is one of the artists that you really think about with an exhibition with feminism in the title. She founded the feminist art program in Fresno in 1970. In the late 1970s, she made her dinner party, which was her response to Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper and the fact that there were no women included there. And we have both a prototype for one of the plates, as well as a preparatory drawing from the dinner party. A lot of the works engage with more abstract notions of the erotic, like Joan Moments, and this is a really beautiful painting from 1983 that we were able to put on view through this show. I think it works really nicely with Judy Chicago's vulvic shapes in the dinner party plates.
And then we have this spectacular piece. If you've gone into the exhibition, this is in the main sight line, and it just sparkles like a disco ball. And it's supposed to. So this is a reverse casting by an LA-based artist, Youngjun Kwok. And they create these inverse life castings to showcase moments of intimacy and joy among queer people. So here we have two queer Korean women kissing. And it's called Divine Twilight. And when you see it in the gallery, it's suspended on a tether, and it actually moves in this space. And on the reverse side are thousands of Swarovski crystals. And so we had to work closely with our art preparators and how to light this piece. So when it is shown in the gallery, it sparkles, and it gives off this really lovely halo, like a disco ball. So it's joyous, it's supposed to be happy, but it's also supposed to be difficult for you to see at first and to make out what's happening. And according to Youngjun Kwok, this is intentional. So they want to present something that is difficult for you to see. It requires you to spend time with it so that you don't make snap judgments about the people here. So yeah, it's just a really phenomenal piece, and I'd talk more, but we're running out of time.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should skip to the end now, because we're a little bit over time.
Okay, let's skip to
Should
the
we,
end.
We're gonna
This was
skip.
bound to happen.
Yeah, we can just talk forever. We do. Luckily, we get to work together every day. But I want to make sure there's time for questions. So we're going to skip through the next gallery. You'll see the slides as we go. And then we're going to plug a program that we have coming up. So here is the collective memory section, a few examples from that.
Really beautiful double weave basket by Cherokee artist Shanko Shorn, who's no longer with us, but just a phenomenal example of her work.
And then Nancy Udelman is a student of Judy Chicago's at the Feminist Art Program. And then we have a section called Material Memory, looking at how materials and process are showing women's labor and embed meaning.
One of those materials is, well,
Hair.
hair.
We have a lot of hair wreaths in the Crocker's collection.
But also actual objects and materials that belong to the artist. So this is an artist, Roz Rittler, and this is her wedding dress that she's deconstructed to tell her own life story. And so we're at the end, but we quickly want to plug this phenomenal talk. So we just gave you a backstory of like curating the exhibition. We didn't go over feminist theory, but if you're interested in the history of feminist art and feminist theory, please come to this exhibition or this talk. It's happening February 28th at 2 o'clock. It'll be right here. And it's by Dr. Rachel Middleman, who's a professor of art history at Chico State. And she's going to talk about her research on women's erotic art from the 1960s and 70s in relation to artworks that are in our collection and exhibition. So it's going to be a really great afternoon.
Yeah, and buy a copy of her book. We both have very well-loved copies on our desk. So thank you all so much. Thank you to the Kingsley Art Club, and we hope to get some great questions. Yeah.
That went by.
Do we have time for a question? Do you have the mic? Pam has the mic. Okay, we're going to do just a couple of questions, and then we'll move across the hall, and then you can bombard Sara and Francesca with more questions. But I did want to thank you so much. And Sara Farkas, are you in the audience?
She's here somewhere, I think.
Where is
There
she?
she is, in the back.
Yay.
We're in the back. Sara,
Yay,
raise
Sara.
your hand. I want to acknowledge you. Sara Farkas, also one of the Crocker curators, curated the Sense of Beauty exhibit, which is in the historic building. If you have not seen that, is absolutely gorgeous. And you have a dynamic team in the curatorial. You have Amelia Kit-Yu, you have Caitlin Schwartz, and I know there's some other women. I am so grateful that the Crocker is in good hands for the future. So thank you so much, ladies. Okay, so we have a question. Pam, I think right here, right here.
Thanks. As curators, how do you decide what to purchase for the collections?
Oh, that's a good question. So some museums have very large acquisition funds. The Crocker generally doesn't just have like pots of money sitting around to acquire artworks. We do have a few designated areas that are for specific works, like artists who are born in India, that we can tap into funding for that. But for the most part, the way that we go about it is that we work with donors. I'll give one donor a shout out because his name is all over our labels, Simon Chu. And we work with them to tell them what our wish list is, and then we keep an eye on the market with that donor, and then we go to acquire that work. And so we try to always know like what our priorities are, share that with the donor who is going to help us make that purchase, and then find something that's fitting for the museum.
Most of the artwork in any museum's collection is not purchased. It's donated. It's gifted by a collector or by the artists themselves. It's actually very rare for museums to go after and acquire a piece of work, an artwork, yeah.
Yeah.
Pass that down to Nancy.
I don't have a question. I just want to compliment you on how well you work together and how this was such a collaborative talk. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're very lucky.
Yeah.
I have a question and a comment. I have seen the exhibit. I didn't have enough time. Today I'm going to dwell more. It's exquisite. It's just speaks so much. I'm wondering, along with the fact that just feminine artists, women artists, I should say, that's outside of the norm to begin with within art establishment. But I'm really appreciating the ethnic and racial
Diversity.
variety
Yeah.
in your exhibit. Was that intentional? Did you seek to represent women of color?
Yeah.
And then just a little bit more comment. I joke about being older than dirt, but not older than art. And I go back to the feminist movement when we had consciousness-raising groups, and we did burn our bras. And I just wanted to add that to the note. The nude who was so hairy, that was an important part of us accepting our bodies and getting rid of things like bras.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have to wear skirts to work anymore. We don't have to wear uncomfortable shoes. You can wear pants. Wow, believe it or not. But I do think in regard to your question about diversity and being inclusive, we try to be as inclusive as possible in regard to sexual orientation, ethnicity, artistic training. There are different levels of artistic training represented in this exhibition. So not only artists who have received formal training at colleges and universities, but artists who have gained skills that have passed down through generations, through families, or maybe they've gained their skills on the job or elsewhere.
And class.
Class, of course. And then in regard to media, we wanted to be as inclusive and non-hierarchical as we could. So not just showcase a painting-heavy or a sculpture-heavy show, but include craft in the exhibition, because that's really where you're breaking down these systems, these patriarchal systems that exist in the field of art history. So where you have painting at the very top, painting and sculpture, and you have craft near the bottom. So in this space, we wanted to create a non-hierarchical display where all of these different types of artwork have value and are placed on an even playing field.
Yeah, and I think that's where our research and making targeted acquisitions was especially important. Because the collection was already doing a lot, but every museum can do better. And so we wanted to make sure that this exhibition was pushing that forward.
And now we have a
making
better
this-
idea of where we want the collection to go and how we want it to grow because we did this show and we were able to do as much research as we did.
Okay, we have one more question.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question, I'm a visual artist and with the Royal Chicano Air Force. I don't know if you've had a chance to connect with, or during the time you were organizing this exhibit, if you overlapped or connected in some way with the exhibit that Elaine O'Brien curated some years back. She Laughs
Yeah.
Back, Joan Moment, Louis Stanley, myself, and others were in the exhibit. I'd be interested to hear how you might have informed each other's exhibits.
Yeah, actually that exhibition was a real touch point for us. So Sarah and I were both at the opening. We really enjoyed seeing your work on view there. And that was really where the conversations began for us. And so we were thinking, we had been talking about it even before we came to the Crocker, about our shared interest in feminism and women's art and experiences. But we were seeing, a lot of these artists are in our collection. A lot of them are not in our collection. What is the Crocker's collection doing? And that was our jumping off point from there.
Most of the galleries, our permanent collection galleries here at the Crocker, are based by geography or they're chronological. So there's not really a space in the museum for artwork by women to kind of be in dialogue and talk to one another. And so we wanted to create that space. And we were incredibly inspired by Elaine's exhibition and her use of humor. But we wanted to think about not just humor as a theme, but what other themes are out there that we're seeing in the collection. Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope you will join us across the hall for the reception.